Admiral Seok-Jin Park walked through the long metal hallways of the giant alien ship. His black uniform felt heavy under the strange lights that glowed from the ceiling. Behind him, two other humans followed. Yuri Kim wore the dark blue clothes of Earth's diplomatic service. Her face showed no fear, but her hands stayed close to the data pad she carried. Dongwoo Lee moved like a soldier, even though he now worked as Earth's military advisor. His eyes watched everything around them. The alien ship was huge, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. The walls were smooth and curved in ways that hurt to look at for too long. Strange sounds came from hidden speakers. Sometimes it sounded like music. Sometimes it sounded like voices speaking in languages no human could understand. "Stay calm," Yuri said quietly. "Remember, we represent all of Earth today." Seok-Jin nodded. 1 year ago, Earth had joined the Galactic Council. It was supposed to be a great day for humanity. Now they were being called to a meeting and nobody knew why. The message had been short and cold. It just said, "Payment discussion required." They reached a massive door that was 3 times taller than any human. It opened without a sound. Inside was a room so big that Seok-Jin could barely see the other end. The ceiling was lost in darkness above them. In the center of the room, 12 different alien beings sat behind a curved table that looked like it was made from one giant piece of black stone. The human delegation walked to 3 small chairs that had been placed in front of the alien council. As they sat down, Seok-Jin looked at each alien in turn. He had studied their files for weeks, but seeing them in person was different. The largest alien was Velthari. She belonged to a race called the Zephyrians. Her skin was blue-gray and looked like it was made of stone. 4 arms moved as she sorted through papers. Her eyes were completely black and much larger than human eyes. When she looked at the humans, Seok-Jin felt like she was looking through him instead of at him. To her left sat a creature that looked like a giant insect. Its name was Click-Thar, and it came from a race called the Manthari. Its head moved in, quick, jerky movements. Its eyes were made up of thousands of small parts, like the eyes of a fly, but much bigger. Sometimes it made clicking sounds that seemed to be part of how it talked. On the right side of the table was something even stranger. It looked like it was made of water, but it held its shape like a person. This was the representative of the aquatic collective. It spoke by making bubbles in the water that formed its body. A machine next to it turned the bubble patterns into words the other aliens could understand. There were 9 other aliens around the table. Some looked like animals from Earth, but wrong in ways that made humans uncomfortable. Others looked like nothing that had ever lived on any planet. All of them were staring at the 3 humans. Velthari stood up. When she did, she was almost 3 meters tall. Her voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Humans of Earth," she said, "you have been members of the Galactic Council for exactly 1 standard year. During this time, your species has used our resources, lived in our space, and gained benefits from our trade networks." She pressed something on the table in front of her. The air above the humans began to glow. Numbers appeared, floating in the space between the humans and the aliens. The numbers were huge, bigger than any number Seok-Jin had ever seen in his military career. "The bill for your first year of membership has been calculated," Velthari continued. "The total amount owed is 847 trillion galactic credits." Yuri's face did not change, but Seok-Jin saw her hands tighten on her data pad. Dongwoo leaned forward slightly, his soldier's instincts telling him that this was a threat. "What does this debt cover?" Yuri asked. Her voice was steady and professional. The insect alien, Click-Thar, made a series of rapid clicking sounds. A translator box near the table turned the clicks into words. Integration fees, resource consumption taxes, cultural contamination cleanup, costs, the machine said in a flat, emotionless voice. "Cultural contamination?" Dongwoo asked. His voice had an edge to it that made several aliens shift in their seats. Velthari's 4 arms moved as she accessed more information. "Your species has required significant resources to manage. In your first year, you have caused 3 trade disputes, 2 minor territorial conflicts, and 1 major incident involving human culture causing psychological problems on the planet. Kepler 442b. Seok Jin remembered that incident. A human musician named Jae-ho had been invited to perform at a cultural exchange on an alien world. He had played jazz music. The aliens there had never heard anything like it. Instead of enjoying the music, they had gone into some kind of trance state. Half the planet's population had stopped working for 3 days. They just sat and listened to recordings of the performance over and over again. That was one person playing music, Seok Jin said. How is that our fault? The water creature made rapid bubbles. Its translator turned the bubbles into words. Human. Culture is unpredictable. Dangerous. Requires constant monitoring and cleanup when problems occur. Your music caused a planetary economic crisis, Clickthar's translator added. Cost of medical treatment and lost productivity. 47 billion credits. Yuri stood up slowly. Around the table, several aliens moved backward. Humans were smaller than most of the council members, but there was something about the way humans moved that made other species nervous. We need to see a complete breakdown of these charges, Yuri said. Every credit must be explained and justified. The debt is legal and final, Velthari said. Her voice was harder now. You have 30 standard days to arrange payment. If you cannot pay, humanity will be expelled from the Galactic Council and marked as a rogue species. The room became very quiet. Even the strange background sounds from the ship's systems seemed to stop. Dongwu knew what being marked as a rogue species meant. He had read the files. It meant Earth would be cut off from galactic trade. No alien. Ships would visit Earth. Humans would not be allowed to travel to other worlds. If Earth tried to expand to other planets, the Council could use military force to stop them. What if we refuse to pay? Dongwu asked. Every alien in the room made a different sound. Some hissed, some clicked, some made noises that had no human equivalent. Velthari's black eyes focused on Dongwu. Refusal is not an option, she said. The debt exists. It must be paid. Everything is an option, Dongwu replied quietly. The tension in the room increased. Several aliens began to glow or change color. These were signs of stress or anger in their species. Yuri looked at the floating numbers again. 847 trillion credits. Earth's entire economy was worth about 4 trillion credits. Even if they sold everything on Earth, every building, every ship, every piece of technology, they could not pay even 1% of this debt. We will need time to discuss this with our government, Yuri said. 30 days, Velthari repeated. Not 1 day more. The council has spoken. The 3 humans stood up. As they walked toward the massive door, Seok Jin could feel all 24 alien eyes watching them. The door closed behind them with a soft sound, but to the humans it felt like the sound of a prison cell locking. In the hallway, the 3 humans walked in silence for several minutes. Finally, Dongwu spoke. They're trying to get rid of us, he said. This isn't about money. It's about control. The amount is impossible, Yuri agreed. No species could pay this much. They want us gone, but they want to make it look legal. Seok Jin nodded. Then we need to find a way to beat them at their own game. As they walked back to their small human ship, none of them knew that this moment would change the galaxy forever. They only knew that Earth had 30 days to find an answer. To an impossible demand, the game had begun. The Seoul Conference Center had never been so busy. People rushed through the hallways carrying files, tablets, and cups of coffee. The building's main meeting room was full of Earth's most important leaders. They had all dropped everything to come here when the emergency call went out. President Minho Choi sat at the head of the long table. His face was tired. He had not slept much since the message from the Galactic Council arrived. Around the table sat the people who would help decide Earth's future. Minister of Defense Hai Jin-yoon had flown in from the military headquarters in Geneva. She was a small woman, but everyone in the room knew she was tough as steel. Space Force Commander Tae-hyun Nam sat next to her. His uniform had new burn marks from a training accident the day before, but he had refused to change clothes. There was no time. Chief Economist So Young-jang spread papers across the table in front of her. The numbers on the papers were all bad news. Dr. Jinna Bay sat quietly in the corner. She was Earth's leading expert on quantum physics, but today she was here because she knew more about alien law than anyone else on the planet. At the far end of the table, a hologram showed Admiral Seok-jin Park. He was still on the alien station, along with Yuri Kim and Dongwoo Lee. The hologram made his face look blue and slightly fuzzy, but his anger came through clearly. "Tell me again," President Minho said. "How much do they want?" 847 trillion galactic credits, Seok-jin replied. "To put that in perspective, it's about 200 times more money than exists on all of Earth." So Young looked up from her papers. "I've run the numbers 12 different ways. Even if we sold everything, every building, every ship, every piece of technology, we couldn't pay 1% of this debt." "What if we tried to negotiate?" asked Hye-jin. "Offer to pay a smaller amount over a longer time?" Yuri's voice came through the hologram system. "They made it clear that negotiation isn't an option. The debt stands as presented. Pay it or face the consequences." Tae-hyun leaned forward. "What exactly are these consequences?" Dongwoo answered from the hologram. "Earth gets marked as a rogue species. Complete economic blockade. No trade with any alien civilization. No travel. Rights for humans. If we try to expand to other planets, they can use military force to stop us. In other words," Dr. Jinnah said quietly, "they lock us in our solar system forever." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Humanity had just started to explore the galaxy. There were so many worlds to see, so many things to learn. Being trapped in the solar system would be like being put in prison. "There has to be something we can do," Minho said. "Some legal option, some way to fight this." Dr. Jinnah stood up and walked to the front of the room. She was nervous, speaking to so many important people, but she had information they needed to hear. "I've been studying the Galactic Council's legal system for the past 6 months," she said. "Most of their laws are designed to prevent war and maintain order. But there's one law that might help us." She pressed a button on her tablet. The room's main screen lit up with alien text. Below the alien writing was a translation in Korean and English. "This is subsection 847C of the Galactic Council Charter," Jinnah explained. "It's called the right of simple response. If a member species faces what the law calls an existential bureaucratic crisis, they can respond to any demand with a single word." Hye-jin frowned. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means if someone makes a demand so unreasonable that no normal response is possible, you can just say one word. Then the accuser has to either accept that word as a complete answer, or they have to prove in detail why your one word isn't good enough." Tae-hyun laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "One word to answer a demand for 800 trillion. Credits? It's never been used before," Jinnah admitted. "The law was written 300 years ago, but no species has ever been desperate enough to try it." From the hologram, Seok-jin spoke up. "The aliens here have been talking among themselves since our meeting yesterday. I don't think they expected us to ask for time to think about this. Most species probably just accept whatever the council demands. Or they negotiate," Yuri added. "But you can't negotiate when the starting demand is impossible to pay." So Young was still working with her calculator and papers. "I've been thinking about this from an economic perspective. This debt isn't real. The numbers don't make sense. It's like they just picked the biggest number they could think of." "Explain," Minho said. "Look at the breakdown they gave us," So Young said, pulling up a chart on her tablet. "Integration fees. What does that even mean? Resource consumption. Taxes. Based on what actual resources? Cultural contamination cleanup? They're charging us for playing music that aliens like too much?" Dr. Jinnah nodded. "The law says that if we use the right of simple response, they have to justify every part of their demand. They have to show their math, explain their legal reasoning, and prove that their demand is fair and reasonable." "And if they can't?" asked Hye-jin. "Then our one-word response stands as the final answer to their demand." The room was quiet again as everyone thought about this. It seemed too simple, too easy. But then again, sometimes the best solutions were the simple ones. "Commander," Tae-hyun spoke first. "It's risky. If this doesn't work, we'll have made them angry. They might decide to skip the 30-day deadline and just declare us rogue immediately." "They could do that anyway," Dongwoo pointed out from the hologram. "This debt is designed to be impossible to pay." They want us gone, no matter what we do. Minho looked around the table at all the faces. These people had to decide the future of the entire human race. Dr. Jinnah, in your professional opinion, do you think this right of simple response could work? Jinnah took a deep breath. The law is clear. If we can prove that their demand represents an existential bureaucratic crisis, which an unpayable debt certainly does, then we have the right to respond with one word. Legally, they have to accept it or justify why they won't. But, Minho asked, hearing something in her voice. But they wrote the law. They control the legal system. Even if we're technically right, they might just ignore their own rules. Hyjin smiled grimly. Then we make sure the cost of ignoring their own rules is higher than the cost of accepting our answer. From the hologram, Seokjin asked, "What does that mean?" Taehyun answered, "It means we prepare for war." The room erupted in voices. Some people thought this was crazy. Others thought it was the only option left. Minho held up his hand for silence. "Before we talk about military options, let's focus on the legal approach," he said. "Dr. Jinnah, if we decide to use this right of simple response, what word should we choose?" This question led to the biggest debate of all. For the next 3 hours, Earth's leaders argued about single words. Some wanted a word that sounded legal and formal. Others wanted something that would insult the aliens. Dr. Jinnah insisted that the word had to be appropriate under galactic law. Finally, Yuri spoke from the hologram. "I think we're making this too complicated. They made a demand. We think the demand is unreasonable. There's really only one word that honestly represents how we feel about it." "Which word?" Minho asked. Yuri paused for a moment, then said simply, "No." The room fell silent. Everyone thought about this. It was so simple, so direct, so human. Dr. Jinnah nodded slowly. "It works legally. It's clear and unambiguous. It directly responds to their demand." Taehyun grinned. "It's also going to make them absolutely furious." "Good," said Hyejin. "Maybe it's time someone made them angry." President Minho looked around the room one more time. "All in favor of using the right of simple response with the word no?" Every hand in the room went up. The decision was unanimous. From the hologram, Seokjin smiled for the first time since the meeting with the aliens. "When do we give them our answer?" "As soon as possible," Minho replied. "The sooner we do this, the sooner we find out if we're brilliant or completely insane." As the meeting ended and people began to leave, Dr. Jinnah stayed behind. She looked at the alien text still displayed on the main screen. 300 years ago, some alien lawyer had written these words, probably never thinking they would be used, certainly never thinking they would be used by humans. She wondered what would happen when the Galactic Council heard Earth's response. Would they accept it? Would they be angry? Would they declare war? She didn't know, but she was proud that humanity had chosen to fight back instead of just giving up. That was very human, she thought. When faced with an impossible situation, humans didn't surrender. They said no. Dr. Jinnah Bey had not slept properly in 2 weeks. Her small office in the Earth Embassy section of the alien station was covered with papers, tablets, and coffee cups. The walls were lined with books about galactic law, alien languages, and legal precedents from dozens of different civilizations. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the clock on her wall. It showed Earth time, 3:17 a.m. But time didn't mean much on the alien station. There was no day or night here, just the endless hum of alien machinery and the strange lights that never dimmed. A soft knock on her door made her look up. "Professor." Woo-Sung Park entered, carrying 2 cups of tea and looking as tired as she felt. Behind him came Yoonbi Lee, the young woman who specialized in alien languages. Both of them had been working just as hard as Jinnah. "Any luck with the legal research?" Woo-Sung asked, setting down one of the teacups next to Jinnah's keyboard. "The law is solid," Jinnah replied. "The right of simple response is clearly written and legally binding. If we invoke it properly, they have to respond according to their own rules." Yoonbi sat down in the chair across from Jinnah's desk. "I've been analyzing how the word no translates into the major galactic languages. It's fascinating. In Zephyrian, The closest translation actually means refusal with finality. In Manthari, it translates to negative response requiring justification from the questioner. That's perfect, Jinnah said. It means the word carries even more legal weight in their languages than in ours. Wu Sung sipped his tea thoughtfully. Have you heard from the military preparation team? Jinnah nodded toward her computer screen. Commander Tae-hyun sent his latest report an hour ago. They're ready for the worst-case scenario. While the legal team worked on the station, back on Earth, the military was preparing for war. It seemed impossible that Little Earth could fight the entire Galactic Council, but Tae-hyun was a good commander. He had studied every piece of information they had about alien military technology. The report on Jinnah's screen was both encouraging and terrifying. Earth's weapons were primitive compared to alien technology, but they were designed for war. The aliens had been at peace for 300 years. Their ships were built for transport and ceremony, not fighting. Their weapons were meant to deal with pirates and small criminals, not a species that considered warfare an art form. The interesting thing, Jinnah read from the report, is that they don't seem to understand how humans think about conflict. They assume that our small size and primitive technology make us weak. They don't realize that humans are dangerous not because of our technology, but because of our attitude. Yunbi laughed softly. What attitude is that? When humans are cornered, we don't surrender. We get creative. A communication alert chimed on Jinnah's computer. It was a message from Yuri Kim, who was in her own office 3 floors below. The message was short. Legal team meeting in conference room 7, now urgent. The 3 researchers gathered their materials and headed for the elevator. As they rode down through the alien architecture, Jinnah wondered what could be urgent enough to call a meeting at 3 in the morning. Conference room 7 was one of the smaller meeting spaces in the Earth Embassy section. When Jinnah entered, she found Yuri sitting at the table with Admiral Seok-jin and Dongwoo Lee. All 3 of them looked worried. What's wrong? Jinnah asked as she sat down. Yuri activated the room's secure communication system. We've been monitoring alien communications for the past week. We're picking up a lot of chatter about our situation. Good chatter or bad chatter? Wu Sung asked. That's the problem, Seok-jin replied. We can't tell, but the volume of communications has increased dramatically. Ships are arriving from all over the galaxy. Species that normally don't talk to each other are having meetings. Dongwoo leaned forward. Intelligence suggests that word of our situation has spread beyond the council leadership. Representatives from 47 different species are now on this station. That's more than have ever gathered in one place before. They're here to watch, Yuri explained. To see what happens when a species challenges the council's financial authority. Jinnah felt a chill run down her spine. You mean we're going to be an example? Whether we succeed or fail, they want other species to see what happens. Exactly, Yuri said. If we succeed, it could inspire other species to question the council's demands. If we fail... She didn't finish the sentence. If we fail, it proves that no one can challenge the council, Yunbi said quietly. The room was silent for a moment. Then Wu Sung spoke up. Has this changed our plan? No, Seok-jin said firmly. If anything, it makes our plan more important. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every species that has been bullied by this council. Jinnah pulled out her tablet and showed the others her latest research. I've been looking into the history of council finances. Do you know how many species have been expelled for failure to pay debts? How many? Yuri asked. 43. Over the past 300 years, 43 different species have been marked as rogue and cut off from galactic civilization. In every case, the debt was declared impossible to pay. Dongwoo's face grew dark. They've been doing this for 3 centuries? It gets worse, Jinnah continued. I found records of what happened to some of those species. 17 of them eventually collapsed economically and had to accept client state status under council protection. 8 more simply disappeared from galactic records entirely. Genocide? Seok-jin asked quietly. Unknown. But 18 species that were once independent. Members of galactic civilization no longer exist as independent entities. The weight of this information settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They weren't just fighting for Earth's independence. They were fighting against a system that had been destroying civilizations for centuries. All the more reason to do this right, Yuri said. Dr. Jinnah, are you absolutely certain about the legal foundation for our response? Jinnah had checked and double-checked every aspect of the law. She had consulted with legal experts on Earth via secure communication. She had even managed to access historical precedents from the Council's own legal database. The right of simple. Response is valid, she said. It was written into the original Council Charter and has never been repealed or modified. Legally, we have the right to use it. And the word no is legally sufficient, Dongwu asked. More than sufficient. The law doesn't require the response to be complex or detailed. It just has to be a clear answer to the demand. No is as clear as an answer gets. Yunbi added, I've also been researching the council representatives who will hear our response. Most of them have never dealt with a legal challenge before. They're used to species either paying or negotiating. The concept of outright refusal is foreign to them. Good, Yuri said. Confusion will work in our favor. Seokjin stood up and walked to the room's small window. Outside, he could see alien. Ships of dozens of different designs floating in the space around the station. When do we deliver our response? The formal session is scheduled for tomorrow at what would be 2 p.m. Earth time, Yuri replied. The entire council will be present. So will representatives from all 47 observer species. The biggest audience in galactic history, Wu Sung observed. No pressure, Dongwu said with dark humor. Jinnah looked around the table at the faces of her colleagues. These 5 humans were about to challenge a system that had controlled the galaxy for 300 years. They were about to speak one word that could change everything. Are we really going to do this? Yunbi asked quietly. Yuri answered for all of them. Yes. We're going to walk into that chamber tomorrow, look at representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and tell them no when they demand impossible payment from Earth. And then? Yunbi asked. Then we find out if the law means what it says, or if might makes right in this galaxy, Seokjin replied. As the meeting ended and the team members returned to their offices, Jinnah stayed behind for a moment. She looked out the window at the alien ships floating in space. Each one represented a civilization that had survived contact with the Galactic Council. Each one had found a way to pay whatever the Council demanded, except for the 43 that hadn't. Jinnah thought about those lost civilizations. Had any of them tried to fight back? Had any of them said no to impossible demands? The records didn't say, but she suspected that none of them had been quite as stubborn as humans. Tomorrow the galaxy would learn something new about humanity. They would learn that when humans were pushed too far, they didn't break. They pushed back. And sometimes pushing back started with a single word. No. The council chamber had never seen so many beings in one place. Representatives from 47 different species filled every available space. Some sat in chairs designed for their body types. Others floated in specialized environmental suits. A few existed as energy patterns contained in crystal matrices. The air hummed with translation devices working in dozens of languages at once. Yuri Kim stood in the preparation room just outside the main chamber. She wore her best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with the Earth insignia on her shoulder. Her hands were steady, but she could feel her heart beating faster than normal. In a few minutes, she would walk into that chamber and speak one word that could change the course of galactic history. Admiral Seokjin Park checked his uniform one final time. As Earth's senior military representative, he needed to look strong and confident. Even though he was much smaller than most of the aliens in the chamber, he carried himself like someone who was not afraid of a fight. Dongwu Li stood near the door, listening to the sounds from the chamber. His trained ear could pick out different types of alien voices. Some sounded nervous, others sounded excited, a few sounded angry. The entire galaxy was watching, waiting to see what would happen when a small, young species challenged the ancient. Authority of the Council. 2 minutes, announced the alien protocol officer. It was a thin, gray creature with too many joints in its arms. It spoke through a translation device that made its voice sound flat and emotionless. Yuri took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times. Every word she would speak had been carefully chosen and reviewed by Earth's best legal experts. But the most important part of her speech was the simplest. One small word that would either save humanity or doom it. Final communication check, Seok-jin said, touching the small device in his ear. Earth Command. Do you read? President Min-ho Choi's voice came through clearly from Earth. We hear you perfectly, Admiral. The entire planet is watching. Good luck. No luck needed, Yuri said quietly. We have the law on our side. The protocol. Officer gestured toward the door. The council will see you now. The massive doors opened with a low rumble. Yuri walked through first, followed by Seok-jin and Dongwoo. The chamber was even more impressive than it had been during their first visit. Hundreds of alien beings turned to watch the three humans walk across the vast floor toward the small platform where they would make their statement. The human delegation reached their designated spot and turned to face the council. The 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy sat behind their curved black table. Velthari of the Zephyrians stood in the center, her forearms folded in what humans had learned was a gesture of formal authority. Behind the main council table, tiers of seating rose toward the ceiling. Every seat was filled with representatives from species across the galaxy. Some had traveled for weeks to be here. The air was thick with the sounds of breathing, movement, and quiet conversation in languages that had developed on worlds light years. Apart, Velthari struck her ceremonial staff against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Immediately, all conversation stopped. The silence was so complete that Yuri could hear her own heartbeat. We gather today for an unprecedented event, Velthari announced. Her voice was amplified throughout the chamber by technology that made it seem like she was speaking directly into everyone's mind. The species known as humanity has requested 30 standard days to respond to a legitimate debt assessment. That time has expired. She turned her large black eyes toward the human delegation. Representatives of Earth, you have been assessed a debt of 847 trillion galactic credits for your first year of council membership. This assessment covers integration fees, resource consumption taxes, and cultural contamination. Cleanup costs. What is your response? Yuri stepped forward. In the massive chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien beings, she looked impossibly small, but her voice was clear and strong when she spoke. Honored members of the Galactic Council, she began, humanity has carefully considered your demand. We have consulted our finest economists, our greatest legal minds, and our most senior leaders. The chamber remained silent, but Yuri could sense the tension growing. Some of the alien representatives leaned forward in their seats. Others made small movements that indicated nervousness or excitement in their species. We have examined every aspect of this debt, Yuri continued. We have reviewed the charges, analyzed the legal basis for the assessment, and calculated our ability to pay. She paused, looking directly at Velthari. In the silence, the only sound was the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. After this careful consideration, humanity invokes the right of simple response as outlined in Galactic Council Charter subsection 847C. A ripple of sound swept through the chamber. Many of the alien representatives began talking at once. Some sounded surprised, others sounded confused, a few sounded frightened. The right of simple response was an ancient law that no one had ever used before. Velthari struck her staff again, calling for silence. When the chamber was quiet, she spoke with obvious irritation. The right of simple response is a theoretical legal provision. It has never been invoked. But it is valid law, Yuri replied calmly. Written into the original council charter and never repealed or modified. Dr. Jinnah had prepared her well. Yuri knew every aspect of this law better than most of the aliens in the chamber. She continued, according to the charter, when a member species faces an existential bureaucratic crisis, they may respond to any council demand with a single word. The demanding party must then either accept this response as complete and final, or provide detailed justification for why the response is insufficient. Click-Thar, the insect representative, made rapid clicking sounds. His translator converted the clicks into words. You cannot respond to a legitimate debt with one word. According to your own law, we can, Dongwoo said, speaking for the first time. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent his life studying military strategy and legal warfare. The water being from the aquatic collective made angry bubbles. Its translator said, "This is a mockery of council authority." Velthari, held up one of her 4 hands for silence. She was clearly struggling to maintain control of the situation. Very well. If humanity wishes to invoke this ancient provision, state your single-word response. Yuri straightened her shoulders. This was the moment everything depended on. She looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces, then back at the council. Leadership. Humanity's response to your demand for 847 trillion galactic credits is as follows. She paused for just a moment, then spoke clearly and firmly. No. The word echoed through the chamber. For a few seconds, there was absolute silence. Then chaos erupted. Alien voices filled the air in dozens of languages. Some representatives stood up in their seats. Others made sounds that their species used to express shock or anger. The translation systems struggled to keep up with the volume of speech. Above the noise, Yuri could hear specific reactions. The crystalline beings from the Commonwealth made ringing sounds like broken glass. The plant-based species from the verdant worlds rustled their leaves rapidly. Several mechanical species beeped and clicked in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Velthari struck her staff repeatedly, trying to restore order. It took several minutes before the chamber was quiet enough for her to speak. You cannot simply say no to a legitimate debt, she declared, her voice carrying more emotion than diplomatic protocol usually allowed. Yuri remained calm. According to council law, we can. You now have 2 options. Accept our response as complete and final, or provide detailed justification for why our single-word response is insufficient. Siak Jin stepped slightly forward. Furthermore, under the provisions of the right of simple response, we formally request a complete breakdown of the mathematical, legal, and logical foundation of your debt assessment. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds were different. Some species were angry, but others sounded interested. Yuri realized that many of the observer species were probably thinking about their own debts to the council. From the observation tiers, a voice called out in accented galactic standard, "The humans are correct! The law is clear!" Yuri couldn't see who had spoken, but other voices began to join in. "Review the charter! Explain the charges! Show the legal basis!" Velthari looked around the chamber with growing alarm. She had expected the humans to either pay the debt or negotiate a payment plan. She had not expected them to challenge the entire legal foundation of council authority. The insect representative, Click Thar, made urgent clicking sounds. His translator said, "This is unprecedented. The council has never been required to justify its financial assessments." "Then perhaps it's time you started," Dongwu replied quietly. The water being made rapid bubbles that translated as, "These humans are trying to undermine galactic order." "No," Yuri said, using the same word that had started this crisis. "We're trying to understand why you think 1 year of council membership should cost more money than exists on our entire planet." A new voice spoke from the observation tiers. It was Kreval of the Verdant Ring, a coalition of smaller worlds. The humans raise an entry. Commander Tai-Hyun Nam sat in the Earth Defense Command Center, watching displays that showed activity across the galaxy. 3 days had passed since Yuri had spoken the word no to the Galactic Council. In those 3 days, something unexpected had begun to happen. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the Epsilon Collective," reported Lieutenant So-Jin Park, his communications officer. "They're formally requesting a review of their membership fees going back 50 years. Tae-Hyun nodded and marked it on his growing list. Since the council session, 17 different species had filed formal complaints about their debts to the council. It seemed that humanity's challenge had given others the courage to ask questions they had been afraid to ask for decades. "Any word from the council leadership?" Tae-Hyun asked. "They're still in closed session," So-Jin replied. "But our listening. Posts are picking up a lot of encrypted communications between council ships and their home worlds." Dr. Jinnah entered the command center carrying a tablet full of new information. She had been working almost non-stop since the council session, analyzing the legal and political implications of what had happened. "The situation is getting more interesting by the hour," she reported. "I've been monitoring public communications from across the galaxy. The story of humanity saying no to the council is spreading faster than we expected." "Is that good or bad?" Tae-Hyun asked. "Both," Jinnah replied. It's good because it's creating pressure on the Council to follow their own laws. It's bad because it's making some of the more aggressive species nervous about galactic stability. She activated the room's main display and showed a map of the galaxy. Different colored dots represented different species and their current activities. The smaller species, the ones who usually just pay whatever the Council demands, are starting to organize. They're sharing information about their debts and looking for patterns. Some of them are discovering that they've been charged for things that never actually happened. Tae-hyun studied the display. What about the big powers? The ones who actually run the Council? That's where it gets complicated, Jinna said. They're scared. For 300 years, their system has worked because no one questioned it. Now that someone has, they're discovering that their system has a lot of problems. The door to the command center opened, and Admiral Seok Jin's voice came through the communication system. He was still on the alien station, but he had news that couldn't wait for a scheduled report. Command, this is Admiral Park. We've had some interesting visitors today. Go ahead, Admiral, Tae-hyun replied. A representative from the Verdant Ring came to see us. His name is Kree Val, and he wanted to thank us for what we did in the council session. Jinna leaned forward. Thank us? For what? For giving them permission to ask questions, came Yuri's voice over the communication link. Apparently, the smaller species have been unhappy with council policies for a long time, but they were afraid to speak up. Dongwoo joined the conversation. Kreval told us something interesting. The council's investigation into our response has revealed that they can't actually justify most of their charges. The integration fees are based on standard costs that have never been formally defined. The cultural contamination charges are just penalties for behavior the council doesn't like. In other words, Seok-jin continued, they've been making up bills and hoping no one would ask questions. Tae-hyun felt a grim satisfaction. Earth's military analysis had suggested that the council was more bureaucracy than actual government. Now it seemed they were right. There's more, Yuri said. We've been invited to meet with representatives from 15 different species. They want to form some kind of coalition to review council financial practices. Be careful, Tae-hyun warned. The council leadership won't like being challenged by a group of species. We know, Dongwoo replied, but we might not have a choice. If we're going to survive this, we need allies. After the communication ended, Jinna and Tae-hyun continued monitoring galactic communications. The patterns they saw were both encouraging and worrying. The good news, Jinna explained, is that public opinion is shifting in our favor. Many species are impressed that someone finally stood up to the council. The bad news is that the council leadership is getting desperate. Desperate. How? Tae-hyun asked. Jinna pulled up a series of intercepted communications. They're discussing something called emergency protocols. As far as I can tell, these are procedures for dealing with threats to galactic stability. Are we a threat to galactic stability? According to them, we are. We've disrupted a system that has maintained order for 3 centuries. From their perspective, that's incredibly dangerous. Tae-hyun studied the intelligence reports on his screens. Earth's military was as ready as it could be, but fighting the entire Galactic Council would be suicide. Their only hope was that enough other species would support them to prevent a military conflict. What about the species that are supporting us? He asked. Are they willing to do more than just file complaints? Jinna checked her latest reports. That's unclear. Many of them are small powers with limited military capability. They're brave enough to ask questions, but I don't know if they're brave enough to fight. A new communication alert chimed. This time, it was an encrypted message from Earth's intelligence service. Tae-hyun read it quickly, then looked up with concern. We have a problem, he announced. Intelligence reports that several council member species are mobilizing their fleets. The official reason is routine exercises, but the timing is suspicious. Jinna felt her heart skip a beat. How many ships? The Zephyrian Empire has activated 3 battle fleets. The Manthari Collective is moving ships toward council space. Even some of the smaller powers are preparing their military forces. Are they planning to attack Earth? Jinna asked. Unknown, but they're definitely preparing for some kind of military action. The communication system activated again. This time, it was President Min-ho from Earth. Commander Nam, I need a full military assessment. How long can Earth defend itself if the Council decides to use force? Tae-hyun had been dreading this question. Mr. President, our best analysis suggests we could hold out for perhaps 6 months against a limited council force. Against their full military capability, he paused. Days, not weeks. Then we need to make sure it doesn't come to that, Minho replied. Dr. Bay, what's the legal situation? Are we still protected by council law? Jinnah had been working on this question constantly. The right of simple response is still in effect. Legally, they have to either accept our answer or provide detailed justification for rejecting it. They haven't done either yet, but they're preparing military forces. Anyway, Minho observed. Yes, sir, which suggests they might be planning to ignore their own laws. The command center fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Earth had challenged the Galactic Council using their own legal system. The challenge was working. Other species were asking questions. The Council couldn't justify their charges and public opinion was shifting. But none of that mattered if the Council decided to use military force instead of law. Sir, Lieutenant Sojin reported, we're receiving a transmission from the alien station. It's Admiral Park, and he says it's urgent. Put him through, Tae-hyun ordered. Sokjin's voice came through with obvious tension. Command, the Council has just announced that they're ending their recess early. They're calling for a new session tomorrow. What kind of session? Minho asked. Unknown, but they've requested that all 47 observer species send their most senior representatives. They're also allowing each species to bring military advisors. Yuri's voice joined the conversation. They're preparing for something big. The station is buzzing with activity. Ships are arriving constantly. It sounds like they're preparing for a showdown, Dongwu added. Either they're going to accept our legal challenge and change their system, or they're going to reject it and face the consequences. What consequences? Tae-hyun asked. That depends on how many species are willing to stand with us, Yuri replied. If it's just Earth against the Council, we lose. But if enough species support legal reform, then we might actually win this, Jinnah finished. As the communication ended, Tae-hyun looked around the command center. In a few hours, Earth would learn whether their bold gamble had paid off. They had said no to the most powerful organization in the galaxy. They had challenged a system that had controlled civilization for 3 centuries. Now they would discover whether the law was stronger than force, whether justice was more powerful than tradition, and whether a small, stubborn species from a young world could change the galaxy. The next council session would decide everything. Either humanity would emerge as a leader in galactic reform, or Earth would face the combined military might of dozens of alien civilizations. But whatever happened, they had done something no other species had ever done. They had looked at an impossible demand from overwhelming authority and said the one word that mattered most. No. The council chamber had been transformed overnight. What had once been a formal meeting space now looked like a military command center. Representatives from 47 species filled every available space, but now many of them wore military uniforms or carried ceremonial weapons. The air hummed with tension and the sound of dozens of translation devices working at maximum capacity. Yuri Kim stood with her delegation in their assigned area, but she noticed they were no longer alone. Kreval of the Verdant Ring stood nearby, along with representatives from the Epsilon Collective, the Crystal Commonwealth, and 12 other smaller species. They had formed an unofficial coalition around Earth's challenge to council authority. The other side of the chamber, the traditional council powers had gathered. The Zephyrians, Manthari, and other founding species stood in a tight group, their body language suggesting they were preparing for conflict. Admiral Seok Jin checked his communication device one more time. Earth Command confirms all defense. Preparations are complete, he reported quietly to his team. Dongwu nodded but kept his eyes on the council leadership. I count military advisors from at least 20 species. This isn't just a legal hearing anymore. Dr. Jinnah clutched her tablet containing every piece of legal research she had compiled over the past week. The law is still on our side, she whispered. Whatever happens, we followed their own rules perfectly. Velthari of the Zephyrians called the session to order. Her 4 arms moved in complex patterns as she activated the chamber's recording and translation systems. When she spoke, her voice carried across the vast space with mechanical amplification. "We gather today to address an unprecedented challenge to Council authority," she announced. "The species known as humanity has invoked ancient legal provisions to refuse payment of legitimate debts. This session will determine how the Council responds to this situation." Before Velthari could continue, Yuri stepped forward and requested recognition. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien beings turned to look at the small human diplomat. "Honored Council," Yuri said, her voice clear and strong, "before you make any decisions about humanity's response, we believe this gathering should hear the full truth about Council finances." She activated a holographic display that Dr. Jin Ah had prepared. Numbers and charts appeared in the air above the human delegation, visible to everyone in the chamber. Over the past week, our legal team has analyzed Council financial records that were made available under the right of simple response. What we found should concern every species in this chamber. The holographic display showed a breakdown of Council fees collected over the past 50 years. The numbers were staggering, but what made them shocking was how they were used. 73% of all fees collected go to administrative overhead, Yuri continued. 21% goes to ceremonial functions and maintaining the lifestyle of Council leadership. Only 6% actually provides services to member species. A ripple of sound swept through the chamber. Many of the smaller species began talking urgently among themselves. The larger powers remained silent, but their postures suggested growing tension. Krival of the Verdant Ring requested recognition and was granted permission to speak. "The Verdant Ring has been paying Council fees for over 2 centuries. Are you saying that most of our payments have been wasted on bureaucracy?" "Not wasted," Dongwu replied diplomatically, "but perhaps not used as efficiently as they could be." The representative from the Epsilon Collective stood up. "My people have similar concerns. We were charged 40 billion credits for integration services that we never requested and never received." More voices joined in. Species after species began to describe financial charges that seemed arbitrary or excessive. The Crystal Commonwealth complained about fees for atmospheric modifications that had happened before they joined the Council. The Silicon Valley Confederacy questioned charges for cultural contamination that amounted to their people simply being different from Council norms. Velthari struck her ceremonial staff against the floor, calling for order. "These complaints are not relevant to the current situation," she declared. "Humanity owes a legal debt and has refused to pay. This threatens the foundation of galactic order." "Does it?" asked a new voice from the observation area. Everyone turned to see Zethmar of the hegemony standing up. As the oldest member of the Council, his words carried enormous weight. When he spoke, even the other founding species listened. "I have been reviewing the legal precedents involved in this case," Zethmar continued. "The right of simple response is valid law. It was included in our charter for exactly this type of situation, when a demand is so unreasonable that no normal response is possible." Velthari's skin changed color, indicating distress in her species. "You cannot be suggesting that the Council's financial assessments are unreasonable." "I'm suggesting," Zethmar replied carefully, "that a debt equal to 200 times a planet's total economic output might qualify as unreasonable." Yuri felt a surge of hope. If one of the founding Council members was questioning the debt, their legal strategy might actually work. But Clickthar of the Manthari was not ready to accept defeat. The insect being made rapid clicking sounds that his translator converted to angry words. "If we allow this challenge to succeed, every species will refuse to pay their debts. The Council will collapse." "Perhaps," said a calm voice. "That would not be entirely bad." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The comment had come from Quinthara of the Silicon Confederacy, another founding member. She continued speaking. "Despite the chaos around her, for 3 centuries we have maintained order through fear and arbitrary authority. We charge whatever we want and expect payment without question. Perhaps it is time for a more democratic approach." The word democratic sent shockwaves through the chamber. Democracy was a concept that most galactic civilizations found chaotic and unpredictable. The idea of applying it to Council governance was revolutionary. Velthari was losing control of the situation. "This is not a debate about governmental philosophy. This is about maintaining the legal and financial structure that has kept the galaxy at peace for 300 years. Yuri stepped forward again. With respect, honored Velthari, peace built on fear and arbitrary authority isn't really peace. It's just delayed conflict. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a new set of data that Dr. Jinnah had prepared. Humanity proposes a new model for council operations. Instead of arbitrary fees based on species classification, we suggest a contribution system based on actual services requested and benefits received. The display showed a detailed breakdown of what such a system might look like. Species would pay for specific services, trade mediation, territorial dispute resolution, technological exchange programs. The fees would be transparent, standardized, and directly related to value received. Under this system, Dongwu explained, no species would pay for services they don't use. No species would be charged arbitrary fees for cultural differences, and all financial assessments would be subject to review and appeal. The chamber was filled with the sound of dozens of species discussing this proposal in their native languages. Some sounded excited. Others sounded concerned. A few sounded angry. Kreval was the first to formally respond. The Verdant Ring supports this proposal for financial reform. The Epsilon Collective agrees, added another representative. The Crystal Commonwealth endorses transparency and accountability, said a third. Within minutes, 23 species had formally supported the human proposal. It was the first time in council history that so many species had united around a single issue. The founding species huddled together in urgent consultation. They had not expected this level of support for radical change. After several minutes of discussion, Zethmar spoke for the group. The senior council acknowledges that recent events have revealed systemic issues that require attention. We propose a 6-month moratorium on all contested financial assessments while a reform committee reviews council fiscal practices. Yuri exchanged glances with her team. It wasn't everything they had hoped for, but it was a major victory. The council was agreeing to reform rather than using military force. Humanity accepts this proposal, Yuri announced. We look forward to working with all council members to create a more equitable and transparent system. The vote was held immediately. 31 species voted in favor of the moratorium and reform process. 16 voted against. For the first time in council history, the founding species had been outvoted by the general membership. As the session ended and beings began to leave the chamber, Velthari approached the human delegation. Her body language suggested resignation rather than anger. You realize, she said quietly, that you have just dismantled a governmental system that took 3 centuries to build. Yuri nodded respectfully. Sometimes old systems need to be replaced with better ones. And you believe your way is better? We believe, Seokjin answered, that any system based on transparency and consent is better than one based on fear and arbitrary authority. What makes you so confident? Velthari asked. Dongwu smiled slightly. Because our system starts with a simple principle. When someone makes an unreasonable demand, the correct response is equally simple. Which